Microsoft patches 140 plus vulnerabilities, including 2 0 days in this past Patch Tuesday. Adobe patches critical issues in several of its products. 10 billion passwords are leaked. 39,000 Ticketmaster tickets are leaked. Chinese APT40 hijacks routers. Hackers are targeting WordPress plugins. A new attack bypasses radius authentication. CISA adds 3 new CVEs to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, and more in this upcoming episode of the Cybersecurity Digest. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me as we review some of the top cybersecurity news from this past week. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Greg. Today is Friday, July 12th, 2024, and this is the Cybersecurity Digest. This past Tuesday was Patch Tuesday for July. Chief among those releasing patches was Microsoft, who fixed over 140 vulnerabilities, including 2 vulnerabilities that are considered 0 days. This includes CVE 2024-38080, which affects Hyper-V, and CVE 2024-38112, which impacts MS-HTML. Microsoft Security Center has reported that both vulnerabilities have had detected exploitation. It is worth noting that 13 additional vulnerabilities patched in the Patch Tuesday have been identified by Microsoft as exploitation more likely, and 119 have a base CVSS score of 7 or higher. Bleeping Computer reported on Wednesday that the MS-HTML vulnerability had been exploited by threat actors for the last 18 months, allowing them to launch malicious scripts by bypassing built-in security features. This flaw was discovered by Hai-Fei Li of Checkpoint Research. This flaw allowed threat actors to distribute malicious Windows Internet shortcut files that were spoofed to look like legitimate files, such as PDFs. When opened, these files would open Internet Explorer, bypassing security features, and download HTA files to install the malware. This type of attack has been observed being used to install the Atlantida Stealer malware. If you'd like to read more about this research or Atlantida Stealer malware, all of the references used in the show will be in the show notes. In related Patch Tuesday news, Adobe released a security advisory highlighting 3 updates that resolve vulnerabilities for their products Adobe Premiere Pro, Adobe InDesign, and Adobe Bridge. Adobe listed one critical vulnerability for Premiere Pro that could allow for arbitrary code execution. Versions 24.4.1 and earlier, as well as 23.6.5 of Adobe Premiere Pro for both Windows and macOS are impacted. Adobe InDesign 19.3 and earlier, as well as 18.5.2 for Windows and macOS, are impacted by 4 critical vulnerabilities that have the possibility of arbitrary code execution. Lastly, Adobe Bridge versions 13.0.7 and earlier, as well as 14.1 and earlier, had 2 vulnerabilities that allowed for arbitrary code execution and memory leak. If you read or listen to any other cybersecurity news, you may have heard claims of the largest password leak of all time coming out. This claim has been a little bit deceiving, as this was a compilation of leaked passwords and not from a single incident. The Cyber News reported last week on the 4th of July about the new compilation being released by a user called Obamacare in an online hacker forum. The compilation, known as RockU 2024, contains nearly 10 billion passwords and is considered a successor to the infamous RockU 2021 compilation, which boasted 8.4 billion passwords. These types of lists pose a risk to users and organizations for credential stuffing attacks and should serve as another reminder to not reuse passwords. Moving right along, Bleeping Computer reported on Monday of an ongoing extortion campaign taking place against Ticketmaster following data theft from their Snowflake accounts back in May. Bleeping Computer states that the threat actor was originally demanding $500,000 to not leak or sell the data, but swiftly changed their demands to $2 million after leaking 166,000 Taylor Swift ticket barcodes to the dismay of all the Swifties out there. In response to this action, Ticketmaster had claimed that their SafeTix technology protects tickets by refreshing barcodes. The threat actors known as Spider Hunters retaliated to Ticketmaster by leaking 39,000 print-at-home tickets that cannot be refreshed for 150 upcoming concerts. It will be interesting to see how Ticketmaster responds over the coming weeks. Another victim of a recent Snowflake data theft attack, Advance Auto Parts, began to notify 2.3 million people who were impacted by their recent data breach. Bleeping Computer reported that a threat actor known as Spider began selling a database that allegedly contained 380 million customer records, transactions, and other information. Advanced Auto Parts concluded after its internal investigation that the data breach impacted 2.3 million employees of the company. The data included employees' PII, or personally identifiable information, and as a result, Advanced Auto Parts will be providing those impacted individuals with 12 months of complimentary identity theft protection. On Tuesday, the Australian Signals Directorate released an advisory on APT-40, also known as Kryptonite Panda, Bronze Mohawk, and several other monikers. This advisory comes from several cybersecurity agencies and details the People's Republic of China's state-sponsored group. This group is associated with the Ministry of State Security and is known for targeting networks in various countries. The advisory emphasizes the group's capabilities to rapidly exploit new vulnerabilities and their preference for attacking vulnerable public-facing infrastructure over user interaction techniques like phishing. This advisory highlights that Kryptonite Panda is adept at transforming exploit proof of concepts, or POCs, for new vulnerabilities and immediately using them against target networks. They focus on obtaining valid credentials for follow-on activities and using web shells for persistence. The group has evolved from using compromised websites as command and control hosts to employing small office, home office, SOHO devices as operational infrastructure. The report is truly fascinating and definitely a recommended read, so you can identify if you or your organization is impacted by APT-40. Additionally, this report highlights the importance of timely remediation of vulnerabilities to prevent exploitation. On Monday, July 8th, WordFence reported about a vulnerability that was fixed as a result of their bug bounty program. The major vulnerability mentioned in the intro is an arbitrary file upload vulnerability in the WordPress plugin called Modern Events Calendar. This vulnerability was discovered by a researcher named Foxy, and it allowed for authenticated users such as subscribers to upload arbitrary files, potentially leading to remote code execution. It also could allow for unauthenticated users if the site had allowed unauthenticated users the ability to submit events. WordFence recommended that users of this plugin update to version 7.12.09, which was released on Monday. US CERT at Carnegie Mellon University's Software Engineering Institute released a vulnerability note this past week, highlighting a vulnerability that exists within the Remote Authentication Dial-in User Service, or RADIUS, protocol. This vulnerability has been affectionately called Blast Radius by the community. As highlighted in the CERT note, Radius has been recently adopted in much of the cloud services with tiered RBAC, or role-based access control. Researchers from UC San Diego uncovered the flaw that enables attackers to spoof Radius responses. This is due to a weakness in the MD5 hash algorithm that can allow for collisions. The vulnerability can be exploited to bypass MFA and allow for a man-in-the-middle attack. More information about this attack and the suggested mitigations from the researchers can be found in the show notes. On Thursday, July 11th, the Hacker News reported of Palo Alto Networks releasing security updates to address 5 security flaws impacting several of their products. Of those 5 bugs, one is a critical bug that could allow for authentication bypass and admin account takeover in Palo Alto's Expedition migration tool. Also noted by the Hacker News, the Blast Radius vulnerability from the previous story was another fixed vulnerability in this advisory. On Wednesday, July 10th, GitLab released updates for 6 different vulnerabilities. Most critical of those vulnerabilities is a vulnerability in GitLab Community and Enterprise editions. This affects versions 15.8 prior to 16.11.6, 17.0 prior to 17.0.4, and 17.1 prior to 17.1.2. This vulnerability allows an attacker to trigger a pipeline as another user under certain circumstances. GitLab recommends upgrading to the latest version as soon as possible. All right, everyone, it is time to head over to our CISA Kev Corner to inform you of additions to the CISA Known Exploited Vulnerabilities catalog. For those of you unaware, CISA, or the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, maintains a list of vulnerabilities that are known to be exploited in the wild. This week, there are 3 additions. As I mentioned earlier, during the Microsoft Patch Tuesday updates, the Windows Hyper-V and MS-HTML vulnerabilities were added this week on Tuesday. Additionally, there is one more that we have not talked about yet, and that is CVE 2024-23692, which is vulnerability in Reheto HTTP file server. To quote the description from the NVD, or the National Vulnerability Database, Reheto HTTP file server up to and including version 2.3m is vulnerable to a template injection vulnerability. This vulnerability allows a remote, unauthenticated attacker to execute arbitrary commands on the affected system by sending a specially crafted HTTP request. As of the CVE assignment date, Reheto HFS 2.3m is no longer supported. All right, everyone, thank you so much for tuning into the first full episode of the Cybersecurity Digest. As mentioned earlier, all the links and articles mentioned in the show are in the show notes. Additionally, you can head to www.thecybersecuritydigest.com to find all of our links. If you like this episode, please give us a follow on your podcast platform of choice and share with someone you know who is into cybersecurity. As this show gets more mature, I hope to release shows several times a week, similar to this one. Before we head on out, there is one thing I enjoy, and that is dad jokes. If you like them too, please let me know, and I will continue to do them as part of this show towards the end. Here's one for you to round out this episode. Some people think my dad jokes are childish, which is absolutely crazy. They're obviously full grown. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, stay informed to stay secure.